finite lens. There's no doubt about it. You lend a completely different viewpoint to the industry, and it's something we so appreciate. And you're exactly right. Those those moms are the ones who are pushing the industry forward. Instead of reaching for that glass of wine at 1500 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon, they can utilize cannabis and really have much more therapeutic benefit than they would, laying sloppy drunk. That's a big difference, and it creates a better population of people, in my opinion. So I'm really glad that the female movement's what's pushing the industry, and I'm so glad to see you lead that security, that advisement standpoint, and the integrity and the level of professionalism you bring to the table is second to none. So I want to thank you, and just let you know how much you mean to this industry, and I want you to know how much we appreciate you.
Thanks. You used the word integrity that I would say is an important piece as far as the patient goes. And what exactly are you ingesting? So as veterans, we're not very interested in ingesting pharmaceuticals, but just because it's a plant, you really need to understand what it is that you're consuming or using as a topical or what have you, from the pesticides to the additives or the dosage or the quality that you're getting. So not just relying on labels that aren't quite right yet because they're not the dosage and labeling and so forth is now being addressed because it's a newer industry at the FDA level and at the USDA level that really take a look at what you're taking in and know that not everyone out there has integrity. So
that's right.
Really being sharp about that is an important thing too.
Well, it's huge.
And we know how to do that as veterans.
100%. We are the trust but verify, right? I still live by that every single day. And hopefully that's what patients are doing. They should do anyway. Right. So tell us about this process. So when you look at a company's security plan, what are some of the things you're thinking about? Are you thinking about actual security when we talk about a fence with razor wire, or are you talking about, passive security, maybe security cameras, things like that? What kind of things are you thinking about from your advisement and consultant standpoint?
So first, I'm looking at what the state has in their application. So there's a set of requirements, whether it's amount of time that the cameras have to store the data so that it's available for law enforcement, or if it's any other physical security like fence lines or access control or biometrics, and what are the requirements. And each state has specific details on what they're looking for. Then I'm starting to add my experience and best practices to add things like law enforcement liaison, being sure that there's an education process and a connection to the community. As we've heard in the news, things like hemp being transported, and law enforcement will pick that up.
Right.
How can we prevent that? How can we take a better look and have better relationships so we know how to show up with the right documentation, what's expected, what do we do if there's a break-in, how do we make sure that the community, because the community is a big piece of it as well, how do we make sure that the communities that the cannabis industry is operating are in line with the views of the community? So are we considering public transportation access? Are we considering the neighborhoods in which a processor might go into? What are the different things that we're looking at from a security perspective, like we might as an embassy or a base or anything like that, or our unit or our Marines that are going out overseas? How do we then translate that into a civilian language is what I'm applying in best practices, and it all comes back to what the state requirements are, because they are individually different on the application.
So true. We're joined by Patricia Haley. She is a cannabis licensed security director in multiple states and also a Marine Corps veteran. Patricia, that's so key. What you just said with the embassies, everything that you did in the past, just moving right towards this. And That's something we want to encourage in our brothers and sisters. Hey, if you've got skills and sets of, assets that you learned from your time in the military and you want to get in this cannabis industry, do that. Take something and apply it to this industry instead of just trying to say, hey, I want to get into the industry and they don't know how to get into the industry, right? So if you were security, do security side in the industry to get started. That's a big encouraging factor that I want to make sure our listeners hear. Instead of thinking that you can just jump right in, do what you're good at first to get the experience and understanding, and then start branching out after that. That's a huge asset to it. What was it like when you were setting up your consultant side and your consultant firm? How hard was that for you?
So I had my consulting firm, and I was teaching a lot of safety training, whether it's female traveler safety training for NGOs or the State Department, folks like that working overseas. So I had the business set up as it was, but then I'd also worked on active shooter training for the DHS, traveling and talking to large groups, 10 to 200 folks, presenting to them on options for in response to active shooter. So those pieces of my business were already set up, and because the cannabis industry, like I mentioned earlier, the lag times between the application phase or even getting to that, because the states are working through regulations and banking and different parts of the industry, then you really have to know that you have to have multiple streams of income. And so I
Absolutely.
had those pieces already that I was working on. There's a lot of overlap, because when I start to train employees on things like, hey, should I carry concealed and come to work? Well, that individual, for example, could be a veteran who thinks, well, I have this training, but what they need to look at it as a strategic view is, does my employer have the insurance that will cover anything that happens? And that answer is no. So really applying the best practices that I've learned in other parts of the industry, whether it's education or training with NGOs, has helped me a great deal, and then has helped me stay afloat, because I certainly, am not going to be able to wait for all these applicants in between. And as I'm sure you've experienced as well, that some parts of it, like my committee chairperson or in another advisory board that I work with, some of those pieces can be voluntary. So you really
Right.
have to think about how you want to, what is your goal in this industry? Are you wanting to then be an owner of a full vertical, or are you really more set at this time to be more of a cannabis enthusiast or an advocate? Are you trying things, for yourself? What is your goal today? Like we always learn in the military, your short, mid, and long-term goals, and breaking those down and moving forward in that way, because it certainly doesn't happen overnight, and the industry is always flexing and changing. So, but it's
Oh my
exciting, and that's
gosh.
part of what we like as
Not more true
military members.
words.
Yeah.
Not more true words have ever been mentioned that, do what you know. And you just said it perfectly well right there. Patricia, if our listeners want to get a hold of you, how can they reach out and touch base with you?
Email is great. P Haley, PHALEY at Gmail, or P Haley Consulting at gmail.com.
Awesome. And you have a website as well.
I do. It is peacefulwarriorgirl.com. So in my view, there's a peaceful and a warrior in every person. And that's what can keep you safe, and being accountable to oneself and not outsourcing your safety. So that's my
It's all
perspective.
about when she comes out, right?
Exactly.
Patricia, I can't say thank you enough for joining us here on the Veterans for Cannabis podcast today. I actually would love to have you on in the future. Maybe we'll talk about some experiences and some applications that you may be seeing over the next little bit. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule today to join us. We're joined by Patricia Haley, a Marine Corps veteran who has a cannabis security consulting business here in the cannabis industry. Patricia, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks. You do the same, and best of luck to everyone out there.
Absolutely. Thank you.